thought I'd do a little walk around on my bike. I kind of debugged it, but other than that, it's just the way it looks after my little road trip. On this road trip, I turned 200,000 since I built it in 1980, 81. So we'll start with the front wheel. It's an Acrot rim. It's laced to a Kawasaki KZ750 hub. The rotors, I believe, are off of a GSXR. The calipers are Honda. The fork tubes are KYB Race Tech tubes that came off of one of my old race bikes. Was a 900 Kawasaki. I made the triple clamps, and they are angled at the same angle as the original Mark III triple clamps. So we'll go to the fairing. Basically, it started life as a Hannigan for a large bike, eBay purchase. Basically, I cut it up in several pieces and shrunk it up to be Norton size, so it's been shortened in height approximately 10 inches and narrowed 8 inches or so, and then fiberglassed back together. I ended up with a bit of a heart-shaped hole in the front, so Indian headlight seemed to be the fitting choice. The two lights down below are HID driving lamps. The gauges are Smith's Electronics, and I made my own gauge mount. There's a oil pressure gauge incorporated also. The little black dot here in the center is a detonation indicator, so if the bike starts pinging, that turns red. The three gauges in the dash are voltmeter. The center gauge is cylinder head temperature, or it can be switched to oil temp or barrel temp or several temperature sensors. The right gauge is fuel mixture. Under these panels are oil radiators, coolers. You can see them behind the louvers on the side. And the air inlet is here on the bottom of the fairing. The turn signals are LED indicators mounted here on the dash. A Brembo 13mm master cylinder and clutch slave. The fuel tank emblems are cut from stainless steel sheet with a water jet. Same as the side cover emblem. The seat is scratch built and shaped to fit my butt. The luggage rack is something I picked up at a bike breaker. I don't know what it was off of. Same with the backrest, but it's been on there many years. The frame has been reinforced here, so I don't have to worry about carrying a load on the back of the frame. The shocks are Works Performance. They're 4-way adjustable with high and low speed damping and spring rate and length. The rear wheel is an XL rim laced to a stock Mark III hub with Buchanan spokes. The rotor is a Brembo from C&W. The caliper is a small spot caliper sourced from Michael Morse at Vintage Brake. It's not very powerful, but that's just what I like for a rear brake. The rear drive is by belt, and I'm making the sprocket carrier and sprockets. It's a poly chain belt. It's a stock rear taillight lens, but I've added LED turn signal flashers to the sides. They're whittled out of magnesium. And I made the front mount many years ago, or the taillight housing mount, I should say. The rear fender is off something Japanese. I don't remember what it was, but it's been on there many years. The foot pegs are something I whittled out of aluminum many years ago, and they just have O-rings around it. The fuel injection emblems are from a Corvette, and the cross flags are from a Thunderbird. The front fender is made from a blank I purchased online one time. I made up the front axle, and the ends are made of titanium. And I like the ARP hardware, so I've used it wherever I could. The front fairing mount is basically an isoelastic rubber in a little housing that is attached to the front of the steering head tube and bolted to a reinforced plate in the fairing. The side mounts are able to pivot, which keeps the fairing mount flexible enough that don't have to worry about cracking things. And the The cross tube is triangulated down to the front down tubes. There's the fuel return fitting back into the fuel tank. And I have a Pingle petcock that I turned sideways because I didn't like it pointing down, and put a new fitting in it. The throttle bodies are 42 millimeter twin throat throttle body that I whittled out on the Bridgeport. Throttle position sensor is a common Ford item. The ignition coil is a twin tower coil from a GM V6. It's wasted spark. The oil cooler lines connect into the fairing here, one on each side. And they run down the frame. The air filter housing is whittled from a piece of magnesium. Holds a K&N filter. This is the bypass oil filter that I recently whittled out. It's also made of magnesium. There are CNW's exhaust nuts. And I made the rest of the exhaust system just out of butt welded stainless steel mandrel bends. You see here where the front pipes are attached to the lower engine bolt. It takes all the flex out of the front pipes. And here is a slip joint with a asbestos packing and a nut to tighten the packing. Inside of this is a merge collector that goes down to, I believe I ended up at 1 1/8 inch at the smallest point before it opens back up and goes into the rear pipes. There's my oxygen sensor to run the fuel injection closed loop. Here is the rod end linkage for the front to control the front side end play. There's the spring that supports the front of the engine. There's nothing in the front isoelastic tube. There's no rubbers and no washers. It's just a hollow tube with a spacer through the center. There's nothing under the original points cover here, since the crank sensors take care of the ignition and the fuel injection. The oil hoses are hard plastic Airline. They've been on there at least 20 years. They just work very well. Here's the fitting for the hydraulic clutch. Goes right through the original clutch cable hole. Here you see the fitting for oil supply to the end of the swing arm. That hose runs up to, I don't know if you can see it, there is my little K&N breather on the oil tank. And there's a T between the oil tank and that K&N filter with a small line on the bottom of it that goes down to the swing arm. And basically the oil mist from the air from the oil tank supplies just enough lube to keep the swing arm felts wet. And that's been on there somewhere in the area of 150,000 miles now, and the swing arm bushings have remained tight. Here is where the oil from the oil pump emerges from the side cover, where I added that fitting. And that line runs basically back to the oil filter. So the oil filter is in the line between the pump and the engine. So after it goes to the oil filter housing, which is mounted in the original position, it goes to a manifold and lines go to the oil cooler and then to the cylinder head. Here is a T that supplies the oil up to the bypass filter. There's another line on the other side of the bike that supplies oil to the end of the camshaft. And the cam is rifle drilled, and so oil is delivered directly to the lifter surface. The throttle is push-pull, so very light spring in there. Just enough to return the throttle most of the way. Here you can see basically it's a plastic, it's Teflon fitting on the side stand. I found that making that so it fits around the frame and prevents vibration and up and down bouncing of the kickstand stays tight much longer. Here you can see the rear linkage that controls the end play of the rear of the engine cradle. The oil line off of this side of the head goes up to the oil pressure gauge. The oil line on the other side of the head comes from the oil coolers. Here is a button that resets the speedometer, and in front of that is my communications port for the ECM. Mounted in here is my voltage regulator. And it's a regulator. It was designed for a Harley, and it's a series pass regulator, so it doesn't load the engine for any more other than what is required by the electrical system. The alternator under the cover here is a 38 amp alternator. Uses an Excelsior Henderson external rotor and a stator of my own build. There's the compression damping adjustment for the front forks. The rear of the aluminum peg mounts has been cut off and a round end has been grafted on, which allows me to run an isoelastic rubber which mounts the exhaust system. And there we have it. It's my idea of a sport touring Norton. It's something I worked on for many years before I got it to the point where I can pretty much hop on it anytime and head across the country, and has the power and dependability to be able to ride with other modern sport touring type motorcycles. And it's been working very well.